recognize. There's Dan. Cole Erickson. There's so many people.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming, for watching, for coming to this Q&A. It's kind of signature of the MFA Symposium to do this. We invited Nina to join us, and also Lauren and Laurel are going between award ceremony and Q&A. They're very popular tonight, but they'll be kind of bouncing in. So Jolie's going to help us kind of moderate if need be, the typical host for these, but thank you so much again for your support. So sweet to see everyone, and feel free to ask questions of us or of Nina or of the actresses themselves. And maybe the best way, Jolie, you might have opinions about the best way to do this, like a raised hand or something. You're the expert, so let me know.
Yeah, we can do that if people want to. Usually it just works if people unmute and jump in. Nobody wants to, or if people want to send things to the chat, I can help field those and make sure those questions get to you guys.
I can jump in. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for doing all of that. It was so beautiful and so wonderful to get to see what you've been working on for the past long while. I feel like this has been sort of in the works for a while. But I was curious if you could talk about, I guess this is more specifically for Abby and Georgia, but like sort of influences that you were drawing on as you were writing and conceiving of this, and sort of what you were thinking about at the same time as you were thinking about making this play.
Thanks, Milo. Well, thinking about writing a play as opposed to like a prose piece, we were working at Parks and Rec this summer and driving around talking and just envisioning like what would happen if a story was mostly dialogue, and it just made sense to think of it as a play. And then reached out to Nina, and Nina recommended some Annie Baker plays, and then Sarah DeLapp and Ruby Ray Spiegel. So we were reading them this summer, and I've never really read any plays. It was very fun to see what's possible with just dialogue, kind of like that constraint, but it was really inspiring.
Yeah, I think like there were a lot of characters in our workplace, and you know, we had nothing to do but talk about everyone and also go like print illegal documents on campus. So we did a lot of that. I think me and Abby's writing in general kind of strays away from character focus and dialogue focus. So we were like, how can we imagine this in a form that makes sense and kind of sticks with our voice, but is also really different from what we're used to. Good question, Milo.
Thanks, guys.
I have a question. So that was so great. It was so exciting to see it, and to see it happen on Zoom too. So cool. So I was wondering about the decision to like break the fourth wall and have the characters turn and talk to the camera at certain points. How you decided to do that instead of putting that into dialogue, and how you decided what would go in those kind of asides to the camera.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I'll turn it over to Nina in a second. I will say that she's really excited about that. I will say that the Zoom constraint was kind of like, first we're like, oh, we'll live film it, and then we're like, wait, we can't have everyone in the same room, wait. So it was kind of always adapting and had to shrink to the size of a car to make sense. So we weren't, you know, it was just too much to do to have them out gardening, to have them back in, to have them in the shop. It was going to be totally impossible to suspend your disbelief for that. So we did originally have them facing the camera, and I would love to, I thought it was a moment of genius on behalf of Nina to change that around. So I'd love to hear her speak to that decision.
Yeah, I think first of all, hi everyone. Thanks for watching and being here. I think specifically with regard to Lauren's or Iris's monologues, like directly to the camera. So I think initially, right, Abby and Georgia, like in the first drafts, if they both had moments of like monologue and soliloquy, and then in the later drafts, that was stripped down to just being Iris's moment. And I think having that be like separate and outside of the world of the car and like exist a little bit more in her head, I think lent something to how she was in a really different place with this work than Candace was, and that it was like a temporary headspace for her as opposed to a livelihood. And that she was like always living in another kind of mental and intellectual space than Candace was while they were doing the same work every single day. And then, yeah, like having it, I don't know, I haven't seen a ton of Zoom theater and I think there's like varying degrees of how people do it, but I knew that I'd read a few things and I knew that I didn't want it to be like two people. I knew I didn't want it to feel like a Zoom meeting. And so I was just trying to figure out how to make that happen. And I figured that if you weren't staring at someone's face, it would help. So hopefully that worked out. Lauren, I don't know if Lauren has any thoughts on how that felt too, because she's here and I can see her, but not to put you on the spot, Lauren.
No, that's fine. I felt, yeah, like the monologues were just almost from the future, looking back on the experience. That's how I viewed it, which is a great perspective, because if she's talking about it from the future, then it obviously meant something to her, and then you just get to have a piece of her mind outside of what she says. She doesn't say a lot about what she thinks unless she's very comfortable, which we see as the progression of the play. But yeah, I think they're almost like journaling moments in a way. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really cool device. So
I've got a question. That was wonderful, George and Abby, and I'm so excited to hear more about the process of writing this, and I miss being in workshop with both of you. And I'm curious, I've always wanted to try playwriting, but I've never done it. And I'm wondering, how do you feel that this experience has changed the way you're writing prose, whether like fiction or nonfiction?
Hard-hitting question, Stephen. I think definitely we have both talked about how we feel more comfortable writing dialogue, more comfortable writing like in a playful voice since doing this. I think it was like a real challenge to just write like the everyday, like the mundane, especially because the theme of this was like tedium in some ways. So to kind of be comfortable to not have, you know, first drafts of this, it's so funny we like cracked up crying at a dialogue moment we had in the first draft that was like so melodramatic and like said a million things about this person's family and their past and this. And I think that's what happens in nonfiction and fiction, is you have these like real step back moments that you can say so much in, but if you're having a conversation between two people, that just doesn't happen and it sounds so silly, or it happens very rarely and not usually in a pickup truck at work. So yeah, I don't know if you have more thoughts.
No, that's pretty much been it, dialogue. And even just like dialogue that feels like a throwaway line but isn't. I mean, at least in story writing, it's like to have someone say something that they actually would in like a really small conversation. But yeah.
I have a question.
Georgia.
Oh. Go ahead.
I just want to know if there's a link to the soundtrack.
Yeah, that's a question we got a couple times. It was Real Live Moscow Radio, which is, yeah, can't reproduce that.
You mean live on the spot?
Yeah, that was another thing that happened from like Lauren and Laurel bringing in a radio. We wanted to make a little bit of a car dash and then the radio function. So it was like, you know, that was kind of a director's influence too. How can they fiddle with that and make something to kill time, and also added like so much to the play, so much atmosphere and also spontaneity, like hilarious, what kind of like Blink-182 comes when they're backing up, and really fun for us at least.
Yeah, a couple of times it was really serendipitous. The lyrics of the song were appropriate to the action in the play. Um, I love that. Thank you, everyone who's involved, and thanks to two of you. I um, I think
Well, you can switch screens. It's like a Zoom.
I think it was Lauren, the actor, who said that those to the camera monologues were like speaking from the future. And I loved that the only other time we're looking back, not in the rear view, but in out the back window, is when we're backed up to the spoils. And so that felt really smart, because it's almost like that's where the history or the spoils or the refuse of the past gets dumped somehow. Anyway, I thought that was really clever that those they made that decision about the rear window. But my question is about your collaboration, Abby and Georgia, about just what that actually looked like. This is a 2-authored play. How did you do it? I mean, did you take on a character each and try out dialogue, or how did it come about?
That's a good question. Do you want to start?
Sure. I think we thought about taking a character each. Didn't really make sense the first time we sat down to write. We just sat down in chairs next to each other and started typing up some dialogue. But I think at one point we would just add to a shared document and then go in and edit each other's dialogue or leave comments. But it was most helpful when we were actually able to sit down together. Really hard to work through like problems of dialogue just on the document. So there was a lot of like sitting down in the same space and working through problems with that. It's definitely a first. I've never collaborated on anything. Writing has always been a very solitary process. It's a good question. So yeah, that was really cool to experience that.
Yeah, the shared doc, and kind of identifying a problem, and it's like whenever you have time, go in, we need to rewrite the monologues, or this scene is not working, and someone would dabble and then someone would go re-dabble. And I would say we only got in one fight about this, so not too bad for a 7-month-long project or whatever it was. And then it, opens up on another level when you bring in Nina and Lauren and Laurel, and it was so fun to have someone else's eyes who wasn't in the process of writing interpret it and kind of take it like way beyond what we even thought about thematically and character wise. So that was really exciting.
I have a question. Did your guys's did the themes that you chose change like throughout your experiences during the summer, and how much did they change during the writing process itself? And I don't know how much those overlapped exactly, but yeah, just how did it develop that way?
I think a lot of it, thinking about like the confined space, it seemed like a lot of it was going to have to do with some like intimacy or like grief or moments of distance. And then, but I think the actual issues that came up changed, but I think it was always going to be about like connections that are made and then missed. People who are kind of like forced to be in the same space and what might happen with them kind of felt true throughout the entire thing. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think it just was so character based at the beginning that like the themes kind of came in as we just had them in the same space and had them talking to each other for so long. And then I think, again, not to repeat myself, the like big shifts in theme came when we brought in Lauren and Laurel and Nina and had some new eyes kind of say like, oh, this is what's happening here. Like these are women relating to each other in different ways all the time and filling in for each other and all this stuff that kind of exploded what we'd already written and been so close to. You can't even really see what you're doing. Nina, also, if you want to add to that and talk about how it kind of grew and changed.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah, it was cool because I read some earlier drafts as we talked about, and I think once Lauren and Laurel came on, I mean, I definitely had some like thoughts about what it meant to me, but I think once we had the actors, like they both brought, in so many ways, they were like exactly what I had pictured when I had just read the text, and then in other ways they were the total opposite. And so having conversations with them where I would be like, that moment wasn't exactly how I'd heard it when I read it to myself, and then having them justify their work and their interpretation was pretty powerful, and I think like one of the most guiding forces through the rehearsal process. I think that they were both so patient, and they've also worked together several times before, so they had a lot of chemistry coming in and a lot of comfort to like try different ways of relating to each other. And so they were able to we were able to try things and like push certain relationships in terms of intimacy, and like whether or not they were going to be playing sort of a mother-child relationship versus a romantic relationship versus a friendship versus a coworker boss, like all the different ways they played with dominance and submission and like intimacy throughout the play, I think very much came from their read of it. And it was just, yeah, it was very cool to see and then have that be what informed rehearsing. Yeah.
This is a good question to follow up on that from the chat. So Deborah Kalila asked, for Abby and Georgia, when you guys shared the script with the director and the actors, what most surprised you regarding their interpretation?
I think that is a good follow-up. Thanks, Jolie. The levels of intimacy, I think like we were so focused on like, what is this individual going through? What is this individual going through? And how are they going to respond? And I think like the different levels of intimacy, especially in the last scene where Laurel asks Lauren, or Candace asked Iris if she'll have a drink at her house. Like it was only like 2 weeks ago, they rehearsed that in a like wildly more intimate way than we had ever kind of thought about. And it was like awesome. And I think that's kind of how it came across tonight, but it also changes all the time. That's a crazy thing about theater, is like every time we rehearsed it, it was different, and that was super fun. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
No, that's definitely
okay.
I also, just to add one thing, I think that also in the text, the like storyline of Eden being like a central player comes out more in the text of it. And then watching them and like realizing that in the stage picture of it, it's just these two people who are not this girl in the car, recentered the like hinge of the story on their relationship as opposed to the person who's not present. Even though she becomes like what the ending pivots on. And I feel like that came out when rehearsal started, for me at least.
I actually would love to ask you actors a question. Lauren and Laurel, what was it like to act on Zoom and to like do this whole production without being able to like see us or have a sense of your audience in real time?
Well, we've actually both done some Zoom productions already, but this was definitely different, having our backs to the camera the majority of the time. And actually, when we first tried it, I wasn't sure about it. I was like, oh, okay, we'll try this. But I really liked how it felt, because the thing with Zoom, it's really distracting to see yourself. It kind of takes you out of the moment. So I felt like turning around kind of solved that. And it was easier to forget that there was anybody watching. That was my experience anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much of the same mind. Like it's really hard to stay in it when you are just staring at a screen and you have no audience. But we were fortunate enough to be in the same pod and be able to do this together. So like when we first did it and we were separate in our own spaces and we were facing away, like it was, you could feel like the change and it was good there. But then like once we came together in the same space facing away, it was like, oh, I'm feeling some of the theater magic again. We're getting some of this back. But also being able to portray that to the story honestly without having the pressure of like, there's a computer behind me watching me. and just focusing like this is the moment. There's a windshield in front of me and a person next to me. So,
and it made it easier to eat too without worrying about stuff being in my teeth. So
Right.
that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think as far as Zoom productions go, this was probably the smoothest one, just because of the format. So yeah.
Cool, thanks for that. We have one more question from the chat. This is from Kayla Nussbaum, and it's a question for Nina. What was your biggest challenge directing on Zoom, or the most surprising like opportunities that led to?
Yeah, thanks, Kayla. I think that I would say this is like both a challenge and an opportunity, but a challenge is that like I'm not only not on Zoom, but I also live in Chicago. So there were like technical things to sort out and like things with like the spaces in Idaho where I was just like, this is so deeply my problem and not my problem. Like I can't touch anything that will be used and I can't see any of the spaces firsthand. And so I just had to like Lauren and Laurel were acting in this production, but they also did like all of the tech, built the set themselves. Like Lauren painted and made all the props. Like they did so much from a technical and like artistic and production standpoint that was such a challenge that I didn't really have to face, and they did such an amazing job handling that. And I would say like the gift that it gave was that I like things with constraints. Like I like working under constraints. And so having the constraint of like, this will actually be most effective if it's always existing in like this frame, I think gave the gift of like, okay, then how do we create distance and intimacy over and over and over again without leaving a tiny box, was like the fun kind of opportunity for me, that I like facing. So yeah.
That's great. Do people have any more questions right now? Cool. Georgia and Abby, do you guys have any closing words?
I guess just another huge thank you to everyone for coming and supporting and encouraging this idea of ours, and for Nina and Laurel and Lauren for jumping in on this kind of MFA themed project. But yeah, thank you so much.
I think we should all unmute and do a real round of applause.
No, Gary.
Hysterical.
Here you go, Mimi.
Congratulations, guys.
Nope.
Where did they go?
Congratulations.
Georgia, this was so wonderful. We miss you so much. I will be in contact. That was so fun. And just, it's so cool to see you like in a completely new element. So
sweet. Thank you guys for coming. So
yes, you guys are awesome. Thank you for this.
Nice.
In here. Gosh, she's yelling. There we go. She's yelling. I know. Congratulations. That was wonderful. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks for staying up so late.
We love you guys. It was great. Anything for you, Abigail. It was wonderful.
Thanks,
So
Neen.
sweet. Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. Brian's here too.
Bravo, friends. Bravo.
Lauren and Laurel, you're in the Pocket Playhouse. Can you stay there for like 5 minutes and answer the door when we knock? Great.